I had always believed that trust was the foundation of any strong relationship. My relationship with him, at least on the surface, seemed like everything I could have wanted. We had met during college, and it felt like fate had brought us together. The late night talks, the spontaneous weekend getaways, the way he made me feel special even on the most ordinary days. It was a connection that felt unbreakable. I never imagined that something as simple as a gut feeling could start to chip away at the perfect image I had painted in my mind. Over time, however, there were little cracks that began to appear, almost imperceptibly. It started with the small things, the way his phone was always face down when we were together, or how he'd become distant when I asked about his day. At first, I told myself I was overthinking. Maybe he was just busy with work, or maybe he needed some personal space. But as days turned into weeks, and the strange behaviors continued, a feeling of unease started to settle deep within me. It wasn't a feeling I could easily explain, but it was there, persistent and nagging, whispering that something wasn't quite right. I tried to ignore it, convincing myself that I was just being paranoid. I trusted him, I trusted us. Yet, the feeling grew stronger. There were times I caught him texting quickly, turning his screen away from me or leaving the room when a call came in. My mind raced, and though I tried to push the thoughts aside, they kept resurfacing. What if I was wrong? What if I was imagining things? But then, one evening, I found myself at a crossroads, unable to shake the nagging suspicion that had taken hold of me. I had to know the truth. Something in me snapped, and for the first time, I decided to act on the unease, to find out once and for all what was really going on. It wasn't a planned decision, but something deep within me told me I had to act. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that I couldn't keep living with this unsettling feeling, the uncertainty hanging over everything we had. So, I made up my mind that I would go to his apartment, unannounced, uninvited, just to see for myself what was happening. There was no turning back now, even though part of me was terrified of what I might find. I had no reason to believe he was doing anything out of the ordinary, but the doubts had been building up for so long that I couldn't ignore them anymore. The last few days had been especially odd. He'd been busy at work, but there was something about his excuses that didn't sit right with me. Maybe it was the way he wouldn't look me in the eye when we talked, or the way he seemed more distracted than usual, always pulling his phone away when I got too close. His texts were brief and impersonal, and when I asked him how his day had gone, he'd change the subject. But when you're in a relationship, you want to trust the person you're with. So I pushed those feelings down, told myself I was just being paranoid. But now, standing outside his apartment, I couldn't ignore the fear, the intuition telling me something was off. I tried to convince myself it was all in my head. Maybe I was just being overdramatic, letting my insecurities take over. But the longer I stood there in front of his door, the more determined I became. This wasn't about snooping or invading his privacy. It was about confronting the growing sense of dread that had been gnawing at me. I needed to know if the doubts were justified, if my fears had any basis in reality. I took a deep breath, tried to calm the whirlwind of emotions that had started to swirl inside me, but my heart was pounding in my chest. I knocked lightly at first, but there was no answer. A part of me wondered if I should just leave and forget about it. But another part, the part that was already fed up with the uncertainty, urged me to turn the handle. It was already unlocked. My breath caught in my throat. Why was it open? Why wasn't he expecting me? The door creaked open slowly, almost as if it had been waiting for me to step inside. The tension in the air was thick as I crossed the threshold, my pulse quickening with every step. I tried to tell myself I was being irrational, that I was just reading too much into everything, but my feet kept moving forward, almost as if they had a mind of their own. The apartment looked the same. Nothing appeared out of place at first glance, but I knew, deep down, that this would be the moment where everything changed. As I stepped further into his apartment, the familiar scent of his cologne lingered in the air, a strange comfort in the midst of my rising anxiety. The soft hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of a car passing outside were the only noises that filled the otherwise quiet space. I stood still for a moment, unsure of where to go, what to do next. The place was exactly how I remembered it: cozy, comfortable, and filled with little touches that made it feel like home. But now, everything seemed off, somehow distant. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was waiting for me to find it. I walked through the living room, scanning the room. Everything looked normal at first glance. The same throw pillows on the couch, the same coffee table with his favorite book stacked neatly beside it. But then, I noticed something: a small purse resting on the armchair by the window. It was unfamiliar, something I hadn't seen before. A chill ran down my spine as I studied it. It wasn't mine, that was for sure. My mind raced. Could it be from someone else? A friend, perhaps? But the way it was placed so casually, like it had been left there in a hurry, made me feel uneasy. My heart pounded as I reached out to touch it, almost expecting something to happen, but nothing did. I picked it up carefully, turning it over in my hands. The purse was elegant, sleek, definitely not something I would have imagined him buying. I set it down again, trying to stay calm, but my mind was already jumping to conclusions. What if it belonged to someone else? Someone who wasn't me? I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but the pieces were starting to come together. I continued through the apartment, my footsteps slow and deliberate, my eyes searching for any sign that would explain the nagging discomfort in my chest. Then, I found it. His bedroom door was slightly ajar, and there, lying on the bed, was his phone. It was unusual for him to leave it unattended. He was always glued to it, responding to messages, checking emails, even when we were together. I could feel my breath catch in my throat. Why was it just lying there? My mind screamed at me to stop, to leave, to pretend none of this was happening. But I couldn't. I picked up the phone, my fingers trembling as I unlocked it. His passcode was the same, something I knew by heart, but I hesitated for a moment. What if I was wrong? What if I was about to destroy everything? But the fear, the instinct to know the truth, overpowered any hesitation. I swiped through his messages. At first, it was just the usual: texts from work, a few group chats with friends, messages from his family. But as I scrolled further down, I found something that made my stomach drop. There, at the bottom of the conversation history, was a message that wasn't meant for me. It wasn't just a casual text either. It was intimate, personal. The kind of message you only send to someone you're involved with in a way that goes beyond friendship. My fingers froze on the screen as I read the words. "I can't wait to see you tonight, baby. I missed you." The words felt like a punch to the gut, and I could barely breathe. I reread the message, as if seeing it again might make it less real. But it didn't. It was like a blow to the head, sharp and clear. The person he was texting wasn't me. I felt the room spin around me as I stumbled back from the bed, my heart hammering in my chest. Every thought in my head turned to static. The pictures I had built of our relationship, the plans we'd made, the future I thought we were working towards, they all began to crumble in an instant. My mind scrambled to process what I had just seen, but it wasn't just the message that hurt. It was the realization that I had been blind to the signs all along, the little clues, the distant behavior, the lies I had ignored. All of it had been leading up to this moment. And now, standing in his bedroom with the evidence in my hand, I couldn't deny it anymore. He had been cheating on me. The reality of it hit me like a wave. I felt my knees go weak, as I sank down onto the edge of the bed, the phone still clutched in my hand. I wanted to scream, to shout, to demand answers, but the silence in the apartment was deafening. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that everything I thought I knew about our relationship was a lie. I felt like I was drowning in a sea of disbelief and heartbreak. The phone in my hand suddenly felt heavy, as if it had turned into a weight that I couldn't bear. I could still see the message clearly in my mind. Those words, so intimate, so full of emotion, meant for someone who wasn't me. My heart felt like it had been ripped from my chest. I couldn't process it all. It didn't make sense. How had I missed all the signs? Why hadn't I trusted my instincts sooner? I stood there, frozen for a moment, unable to move. The air in the room felt thick and suffocating. I could hear the blood rushing in my ears, the loud thrum of my own pulse as I fought to catch my breath. My mind raced in circles, the images flashing before me, him laughing with me, holding my hand, saying all the things that made me feel safe, secure, loved. How could it all be a lie? How could he have been pretending, while all along he was texting someone else, planning a life with them that didn't include me? The silence around me seemed to mock me, as if the apartment itself was aware of the betrayal that had just been exposed. I paced back and forth in the room, the phone still in my hand, staring at the screen as though hoping for some kind of explanation, some way to make sense of it. But no matter how many times I looked at it, the message was still there. The words still stung. I can't wait to see you tonight, baby. I missed you. I wanted to throw the phone, to smash it against the wall, to destroy the evidence that had torn my heart apart. But I couldn't. Something in me, perhaps a part that was still holding on to the fragments of hope, told me to stay calm, to not act impulsively. I needed answers, but how would I even begin to confront him? The thought of him walking through that door, looking at me with those familiar eyes, while I knew everything, that was what terrified me the most. Would he lie? Would he try to explain it away? Or would he be honest finally about the truth I had feared to face? As I stood there, frozen in shock, I felt a surge of anger rising inside me. It wasn't just the betrayal that hurt, it was the deception, the lies, the complete disregard for everything we had built. How could he have done this to me? How could he have thrown away everything we had for something so cheap, so fleeting? The anger mixed with the sadness, and I felt my chest tighten, my breath shallow. Tears welled up in my eyes, but I held them back, refusing to let them fall. I wouldn't let him see me cry. My mind kept spinning, each thought colliding with the next. The pain was unbearable, but beneath it was a burning need to confront him, to make him face what he had done. I had to hear him say it, to see the look on his face when the truth came out. But at the same time, I felt paralyzed, not knowing how to even start that conversation. How could I ask him, "Are you cheating on me?" when everything in front of me already answered that question? I didn't want to stay here. I didn't want to be in this apartment, surrounded by the reminders of a life I thought I knew. I needed to leave. I needed space to breathe, to think, to figure out what I was supposed to do next. Without thinking, I grabbed my bag and headed for the door. My hand shook as I reached for the handle, the weight of the moment pressing down on me. As I stepped out of the apartment, I closed the door softly behind me, almost as if I was trying to preserve some piece of the life I had left before it all fell apart. The chill of the evening air hit me as I walked down the hallway, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt numb. I didn't know where I was going, or what I was supposed to do next. All I knew was that I needed to get away, to give myself time to process the chaos that had just consumed me. But no matter how far I walked or how fast, I knew one thing for sure. Everything had changed, and there was no going back. As I walked aimlessly through the quiet streets, the cold night air biting at my skin, memories of him came rushing back, uninvited but relentless. I could see his smile, feel his warmth, remember the way he'd hold my hand like it was the most natural thing in the world. We had shared so much: laughter, secrets, promises. How could all of it have been a facade? How could I have been so blind to the signs that now seemed so obvious? I remembered the first time we met, how everything felt so perfect from the start. The chemistry was undeniable. He made me feel seen in a way no one had before. I believed in us, in our connection, in the future we were building. We talked about everything: our dreams, our fears, our favorite songs, even the silly things that didn't matter. I trusted him, completely and utterly. The idea that someone could wear a mask for so long, pretending to be someone they weren't, was a concept I had never considered. But now, it was the only thing that made sense. Flashbacks of moments we had shared together flooded my mind. The way he would look at me with those deep, sincere eyes. The way he would reassure me that everything was fine. There were the dates, the trips, the quiet nights in. I remembered all of it. He had always seemed so attentive, so caring. Was that all a lie? Did he truly feel nothing for me? I questioned every single memory, wondering if the love he had shown me was real or just an act, a means to keep me complacent while he sought something else, someone else. And then, there were the little things that I had brushed off at the time. The unexplained absences, the odd messages that he would quickly delete when I wasn't looking, the nights when he seemed distant, as though his mind was somewhere else. At the time, I convinced myself it was nothing. He was busy, stressed, just preoccupied with work or life in general. I had made excuses for him, each time telling myself it was nothing to worry about. How could I have been so naive? As I walked further, I found myself retracing our entire relationship in my mind, replaying each moment with a sense of disbelief. How did I miss the signs? The more I thought about it, the more I realized how much I had ignored, how much I had forgiven. I had wanted so desperately to believe in us, in the idea of love and partnership, that I had turned a blind eye to the cracks that were starting to form beneath the surface. I wondered if he had been planning this all along, or if he had simply grown bored and taken the easy way out. What had I missed in the last few months? What had he been hiding from me? The thought made my stomach churn. And then, the guilt crept in. Guilt for not trusting my instincts. Guilt for not seeing the truth sooner. I had questioned things in the past, felt a little unsure, but I pushed those thoughts away, convincing myself that everything was fine. I had ignored my gut feeling, the one voice that told me something wasn't right. Now, it felt like I had betrayed myself by not listening to it. I also wondered about him, the person I had loved. Was he the same person I had fallen for? Or had he always been someone else? Someone I never truly knew? What drove him to cheat? Was it something I had done? Or more accurately, something I hadn't done? Was I not enough for him? The self-doubt gnawed at me, as if I had failed in some way. But deep down, I knew that his actions weren't about me. They were about him, his choices, and his inability to value the love and trust we had built. As I walked further, trying to shake off the flood of memories and reflections, I knew that I needed to stop looking back. The past was gone, and I couldn't change any of it. But that didn't mean it didn't hurt. It didn't mean the memories wouldn't stay with me, lingering in my thoughts, haunting me as I tried to move forward. But one thing was clear: I could no longer live in the illusion of what I thought we had. I had to face the truth, no matter how painful it was. It was the only way I could heal, the only way I could move on from the broken promises and the betrayal. The moment I walked back to the apartment, my heart was pounding in my chest. each beat a reminder of the confrontation that was waiting for me. I knew it was inevitable, but as I stood in front of the door, hesitation gripped me. My hand trembled as I reached for the doorknob, and for a split second, I thought about turning away, running in the other direction and never coming back. But the anger inside me refused to let me do that. I needed answers. I needed him to face what he had done. I pushed open the door, my breath caught in my throat. He was sitting on the couch, completely unaware of the storm that was about to hit. The casual way he looked up at me, as if everything was normal, made my blood boil. I stood there for a moment, just staring at him, trying to steady my racing thoughts. How was it possible that someone could act so normal after everything that had just happened? Without a word, I pulled out my phone and showed him the messages, the proof of his betrayal, the lies he had fed me. His face drained of color as his eyes flickered between the phone and me. For a moment, there was complete silence between us. I could feel the tension crackling in the air, like static before a storm. He opened his mouth to speak, but I couldn't let him. My voice came out in a rush, barely controlled. "How long, huh? How long have you been seeing her behind my back?" My hands were shaking, my chest tight with the weight of everything I had just discovered. The anger that had built up in me over the last few minutes now exploded. "I trusted you. I loved you. And you were playing me the whole time." His expression shifted, his face contorting in guilt and shame, but it was too late. I had already seen everything I needed to see. I had already realized that nothing he could say would change what had happened. Still, he tried. "It wasn't like that," he stammered. "It just happened. I never meant to hurt you." I scoffed, shaking my head. "Don't you dare make excuses. I'm not stupid. You knew exactly what you were doing." My voice cracked as the hurt began to bleed through the anger. "You made a choice. And that choice was to betray me, to lie to me every single day." I could see the guilt written all over his face, but his attempt to justify himself only fueled my fury. "You think I don't know what this feels like?" I continued, stepping closer to him, my voice rising. "Do you think you're the first person to hurt me like this? You're not special. You're just another person who couldn't keep their promises." The tears that had threatened to spill earlier finally broke free, streaming down my face. I didn't care anymore. I had no control over the emotions that poured out of me. He reached out, trying to touch me, but I flinched, pulling away from his hand. "Don't touch me," I snapped, my voice cold and sharp. "You lost that right when you decided to cheat." His face faltered, and for a moment I saw a flicker of regret in his eyes, but I couldn't bring myself to feel sorry for him. Not anymore. "I never wanted to hurt you," he said quietly, his voice small, barely audible. But his words felt empty. I didn't want his apologies. I didn't need his excuses. The trust had been shattered beyond repair, and nothing he said could fix that. I stared at him for a long moment, my mind a whirlwind of emotions: anger, sadness, betrayal, and confusion. I had loved him. I had believed in him. And now, all of it was gone. The person I thought I knew, the person I thought I would spend my life with, was a stranger. And he wasn't even sorry enough to truly understand the depth of the pain he had caused. "You don't get it, do you?" I said, my voice quiet now, the rage slowly shifting into something more painful: disappointment. "You don't understand what you've done to me, to us. You've ruined everything, and for what? A fling? A distraction? You were my person, and now you're just someone I don't even recognize." With that, I turned away, unable to stand there any longer. I couldn't look at him. I couldn't bear to see him anymore. As I walked toward the door, I heard him call my name, but I didn't stop. There was nothing left to say. The door clicked shut behind me, but I didn't feel the relief I thought I would. Instead, there was a heavy silence, the kind that hangs in the air after a storm has passed, but leaves everything in its wake. My mind was still spinning, my thoughts chaotic. I had walked away, but the reality of what had just happened hadn't fully sunk in yet. It was as though the world had shifted, and nothing felt familiar anymore. I could still hear his voice, his apologies, his weak explanations echoing in my ears, but they were already starting to fade, swallowed by the distance between us. As I stepped out into the cold night, I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. But it didn't help. The air felt colder now, the streets more empty. I wasn't sure where I was walking, but I couldn't stay there. I needed space. I needed to escape the feeling of betrayal that clung to me like a shadow. The weight of the situation settled on me slowly. He had been everything I thought I needed, someone I trusted more than anyone else in the world. And yet, here I was, walking away from him like he was a stranger. The realization hit me harder than I expected. For all the love, for all the time we had shared, none of it was enough to stop him from cheating. And that was something I would never be able to ignore. That was the truth now, the reality I couldn't escape. I walked without a destination, my footsteps echoing in the quiet night. The city around me seemed to blur, as if the lights and buildings no longer held any meaning. My mind kept replaying the moments before I had walked out, trying to make sense of everything. His face, his words, his attempt to justify what he had done. They felt distant, unreal, like a scene from a dream I couldn't wake up from. How could I have missed the signs? How could I have let myself believe in him for so long? The anger had faded, but the hurt remained, deep and raw. I tried to ignore the sting in my chest, the ache that spread through my ribs with each breath. I had loved him so much, believed in us so completely, and now I was left with nothing but emptiness. It wasn't just the betrayal that hurt. It was the realization that everything had been a lie. I had given my heart to someone who didn't deserve it. I had trusted someone who had no intention of honoring that trust. I tried to focus on putting one foot in front of the other, trying to make sense of the chaotic mess of emotions swirling inside me. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't go back. Not now. Not after what I had just seen, after everything I had just heard. I had to move forward, even if I didn't know how. As I walked, I thought about what I had lost. The future we had planned together, the life we had talked about building, gone in an instant. And yet, there was something else, something quieter beneath the anger and sadness. It was a sense of relief, a small voice inside me telling me that I was better off walking away. He hadn't just cheated, he had shattered everything I thought I knew about love and trust. But now, at least, I could begin to rebuild. I could move on, step by step, even if the path ahead seemed unclear. Eventually, I found myself standing at a crossroads, literally and figuratively. The street split in two directions, both leading into the unknown. I had a choice to make. I could keep walking, keep moving forward, even if I didn't know where that would lead. Or I could stop and let the weight of what had happened drag me down. In that moment, I knew what I had to do. I didn't have all the answers, and I didn't have it all figured out. But I couldn't stay stuck in the past. I couldn't let his betrayal define me. I took a deep breath, wiped my tears away, and chose the road ahead. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew I couldn't go back. The only way to heal was to keep walking, to keep moving forward, no matter how uncertain the path might be. The days that followed were a blur. I didn't have a clear direction, only a deep, aching emptiness that seemed to echo through everything I did. But amidst the confusion and pain, something in me began to shift. Slowly, I started to realize that walking away had been the first step in a much longer journey. A journey that wasn't about him or about what we had lost. It was about me. About finding myself again in a world that felt like it had been upended. At first, I didn't know where to start. I was exhausted from the emotional roller coaster, from the weight of the betrayal that still lingered in my chest. But as the days passed, I began to find small moments of peace. It wasn't much, but it was enough to remind me that I wasn't defined by what had happened. The pain would always be a part of me, but it didn't have to control me. I began to take back control, one small step at a time. I spent more time alone, reflecting, allowing myself to feel everything: the anger, the sadness, the relief, and even the confusion. It was important to sit with those emotions, to acknowledge them without rushing to bury them. I allowed myself to cry when I needed to scream when the frustration became too much. But I also made space for moments of quiet, for moments where I could breathe without feeling the weight of the past pressing down on me. One of the most significant things I did in those early days was reach out to friends, the people who had always been there for me. They didn't judge, they didn't ask for details. I didn't need to explain everything. All I needed was their presence, their love. They reminded me of who I was outside of the relationship, outside of the hurt. They reminded me of the things I loved, the things I had put aside for too long. Slowly, those pieces of myself began to reemerge, like fragments of a puzzle coming back together. I also took time to rediscover what made me happy, things I had once enjoyed but had let fall by the wayside in the chaos of trying to fix something that was never meant to be. I started reading again, losing myself in stories that were unrelated to my own. I went on long walks, enjoying the simplicity of fresh air and the sound of my own footsteps. I took up hobbies I had once abandoned and found comfort in those small acts of self-care. The more time I spent focusing on myself, the more I began to understand that healing wasn't an event. It was a process. There were days when I felt like I had it all figured out, when I could look in the mirror and feel strong, confident, and at peace. But there were also days when the pain felt raw again, when I questioned if I would ever truly get over it. But I didn't let those moments define me. I didn't let them convince me that I was broken beyond repair. I had to remind myself constantly that healing wasn't linear. It wasn't about being over it as quickly as possible. It was about taking each day as it came and allowing myself the grace to heal at my own pace. Therapy became a lifeline. Talking to someone who wasn't involved, who didn't know him or the relationship, gave me the space to work through everything in a way that was healthy and productive. I began to unpack the patterns, the red flags I had ignored, and the ways I had allowed myself to become blind to what was right in front of me. It wasn't about blaming myself. It was about learning from what happened, gaining the insight I needed to avoid falling into the same traps in the future. Over time, I began to notice changes. I started feeling stronger, more in control of my own narrative. I didn't need to wait for closure from him. I had already closed the door, and now I was building something new for myself. I was learning to trust again, but not in the way I had before, not with blind faith and without boundaries. This time, I was learning to trust myself, to trust my intuition, and to understand that my worth didn't depend on someone else's actions or approval. One of the most liberating things I realized was that I didn't need to seek validation from the person who had hurt me. I had my own voice, my own strength, and my own sense of worth. The healing journey wasn't about proving anything to him or anyone else. It was about reclaiming my sense of self, one piece at a time. I still had moments of doubt, moments when I wished things had turned out differently, when I wished I hadn't been hurt so deeply. But with each passing day, the sting of that betrayal faded. It wasn't gone, not completely, but it no longer defined me. I had learned to let go, to forgive myself for the mistakes I had made, and to accept that not everything was meant to last. Some things simply weren't meant to be, and that was okay. As the days turned into weeks, I realized that I had found a new version of myself. Stronger, wiser, more aware of what I needed and deserved. And though the journey was far from over, I knew one thing for certain. I had taken the first step, and I wasn't looking back. The healing journey had begun, and with each step forward, I was reclaiming my life, my happiness, and my future. As I stand here now, I can look back on that moment, the moment I walked into his apartment, my heart shattering as I realized the truth, and see it for what it was, a turning point. A painful, devastating one, but also a liberating one. That day, my life changed, but not in the way I had feared. Instead of losing myself in the wake of betrayal, I found strength I never knew I had. I found a path forward, a path that wasn't defined by someone else's actions, but by my own choices. The journey wasn't easy. There were days when I questioned everything, when I doubted myself and my worth. But slowly, piece by piece, I began to rebuild. It wasn't about forgetting what happened, it was about learning from it and moving beyond it. I learned to trust again, but this time, it wasn't about trusting others, it was about trusting myself. I learned that love, true love, starts from within, and that healing begins when we stop seeking validation from those who have hurt us. Today, I stand not just as someone who has been through heartbreak, but as someone who has learned to rise from it. I've learned to embrace my own power, to take back control, and to move forward with a heart that, while scarred, is still capable of love, hope, and trust. What happened wasn't my fault. It doesn't define who I am or who I will become. The future is mine to create, and with each passing day, I'm building something stronger, something better than I could have imagined before. So, if you're listening to this and you've been hurt, if you've found yourself standing at that same crossroads I did, remember this: you are not alone. The road to healing may be long, but it's worth it. You are worth it. Don't let the actions of one person take away your ability to dream, to love, and to move forward. The strength is within you. It always has been. And while the journey may not be easy, with time, patience, and self-love, you will find peace. You will find yourself again. And in the end, that's all that really matters.